Okay, good morning, students. So, we were studying properties of hardened concrete, right? So, previously we have studied, let me just scroll up and glance through the properties which we have studied. So, we were studying the properties of hardened concrete, right? So, we have studied the first property, that is the strength of concrete. Under strength of concrete, we have studied the compressive strength, that is your FCK value. FCK, how we determine it, and what are the provisions in the code. Then after that, we have studied the tensile strength of concrete. And in tensile strength, we have seen that there are three main tensile strength, that is your flexural tensile strength, then there is splitting tensile strength, and then there is direct tensile strength. We have studied how do we perform this test and how we measure the tensile strength of our concrete. So now next property that we studied was the stiffness of concrete, right? The stiffness of concrete. So stiffness is directly related to deflection of the members, and stiffness is given by modulus of elasticity, right? So we have studied stiffness of concrete, and from the code we know that the stiffness of concrete, that is the modulus of elasticity, is equals to 5000 root FCK. Okay. So the next property which we studied was the durability of concrete. Right, we need our concrete to be durable, so that the maintenance and the repair costs are lesser, and the life cycle cost of the structure is lesser. So we have studied durability, some problems related to durability we have seen in concrete, and I have told you that the section 8 in IS 1343/2012 deals with durability. Okay, so this is a few important points regarding durability which we have discussed. And next thing which we looked into was the stress strain curve for concrete. Right, we studied the stress strain curve for concrete under uniaxial compression. Right, this is the stress strain curve for uniaxial compression of concrete, and we have studied this. Then after this, we have looked into the stress strain curve of high strength concretes. Right, this is the stress strain curve of high strength concrete which we have studied. After this, we looked into the curve for uniaxial tension, the stress strain curve of concrete under uniaxial tension. So after this, now we are going to study the next important property of concrete, that is creep of concrete, right? Creep of concrete and shrinkage of concrete are the two properties which are left with. So creep of concrete is defined as the increase in deformation with time under constant load. So whenever we have a constant load, right, the load intensity or the load of magnitude of the load does not increase with time, right? It is a constant load, but it is kept on the concrete or the member for a long period of time, right? So what that does is it causes deflection or it causes deformation in concrete. So whenever there is a constant load for a longer duration of time on concrete, that causes deformation, and that is what we term as creep of concrete, right? So you have understood what is creep of concrete. Next, due to creep of concrete, the pre-stressing tendon is reduced with time. So, because of this, we have to study creep in pre-stressed concrete, right? Because of the losses in pre-stressed caused due to creep, we have seen that due to creep of concrete, some amount of pre-stress in the tendon is lost. So, the study of creep is important when we are looking into pre-stressed concrete. Okay. So the creep occurs due to two causes. Creep occurs why? Because of these two major causes. Because of the rearrangement of hydrated cement paste. We know that when we add water to cement, right? When we all add water to cement, there is this hydration reaction which takes place. And after the hydration reaction takes place, the product which is formed is hydrated cement paste. So because of creep, what occurs is the rearrangement of this hydrated cement paste starts to occur, and that causes creep. Okay, and the second reason is expulsion of water from voids under load. Right, whenever we have a load which is acting, and when we have voids, water voids under it, right, we have voids and we have water stored in those voids. So what happens is whenever there is load on top of these voids, the water from these voids, what will happen? It will start to exit out. It will start to expulse. So expulsion of water from voids under load. So these two are the main reasons which causes creep in concrete. So coming to your next point. If a concrete specimen is subjected to slow compressive loading, the stress strain curve is elongated along the stress strain axis as compared to the curve for fast loading. So Let me just show you the curve which will explain that statement. Okay, so this is your stress axis, this is your strain axis, and this is for concrete. Okay, so stress strain curve for your concrete under compression. So you can see this is the stress strain curve for your concrete under normal loading or your fast loading, right? So this is your normal stress strain curve for fast loading. But whenever we have slow loading, okay, whenever we have slow loading, we can see that the curve is not the same. Ideally, it has to be the same curve, right? Ideally, the curve has to be same whether we are loading it fast or whether we are loading it slowly. Whatever is the loading case, the curve has to be same, but we can see that the curve is not same. For fast loading, we can see we have a steep curve, and when it comes for slow loading, the stress strain curve we can see is elongated. It is elongated, right? We can see at this stress level, there is increased amount of strain, right? Increased amount of strain. For this amount of stress, we can see for fast loading we have this much amount of strain, but whenever we have slow loading, we can see there is increased amount of strain for a particular amount of stress. So this shift of your curve, right? This shift of curve this this curve to this curve is nothing but due to effect of creep. Okay, so this is occurring due to effect of creep. The shift of your curve from this curve to this curve, from your fast loading curve to slow loading curve, is because of the effect of creep. And the effects of creep are, and the creep is caused because of these two main reasons. So that is what is explained here. The If a concrete specimen is subjected to slow compressive loading, right, the second curve which we have seen, if it is subjected to slow compressive loading, the stress versus strain curve is elongated along the strain axis, right? We can see that the stress strain curve is elongated. It is elongated along the stress axis, along the strain axis. Sorry, it is elongated along the strain axis as compared to the curve for the fast loading. As compared to the curve for fast loading, this curve, which is for slow loading, is uh, elongated along your strain axis. So that is what is explained here. So coming to your next point, how is this creep? Now we have seen what is creep. Now we have to see how do we quantify this creep? How do we measure this creep, right? So creep is quantified in terms of strain that occurs in addition to elastic strain due to applied loads, right? We can see that stress, this is elastic strain. We can see this is your strain axis, right? This is your strain axis, and this is time axis. Okay, so whenever there is in continue, the time passes. As time passes, we can see that there is some amount of elastic strain which is already present, right? Elastic strain which is present, and this elastic strain, as it says, that it is recoverable. It is recoverable once you unload the structure. That strain which is caused is regained, or it is regained, right? It becomes zero. That strain becomes zero, so it is recoverable. So it is elastic strain. But after certain amount of time, we can see that there is permanent, or there is inelastic strain which is occurring. This is inelastic strain which is not recoverable. So after certain amount of time, we can see this curve, yeah, it is starting to increase, but the rate of this curve is decreasing, right? So that is mentioned here. So it is decreasing. It increases the creep strain. The creep strain increases with decreasing rate with time. So what do you mean by decreasing rate with time? It increases. It is increasing, you can see, but it is not increasing continuously. It is not increasing continuously. There is decreasing in its increasing rate, right? It is decreasing rate with time. So you can see after certain amount of time, we can see that the curve is getting stabilized. The curve is getting stabilized, and it is becoming flat, right? Is not continuously increasing. So it is called as a decreasing rate with time. Okay, so this stabilized curve, right? This stabilized curve, this is what is called our ultimate creep strain, right? You can see it is marked from here to here, right? From where the elastic strain stops, where the elastic strain stops, from that point to the point where the curve stabilizes, right? So this part is called your ultimate creep strain. So this is your elastic strain, and this part is your ultimate creep strain. So what we can say is the ultimate creep strain, right? The ultimate creep strain is found to be proportional to elastic strain, right? So this creep strain is proportional to elastic strain, right? From this statement, we can say that the ultimate creep strain is found to be proportional to elastic strain, right? So this E ultimate is proportional to elastic strain, that is E elastic. Okay, so if you want to remove this proportionality sign and put a equal to sign, what we have to do? We have to put a coefficient. We have to put a coefficient. So that coefficient is called creep coefficient. The ratio of creep ultimate creep strain to elastic strain is called creep coefficient. You can see it is theta. It is theta. So this is your creep coefficient. If you want to put a equal to sign here, you have to put a creep coefficient here. So that is theta. So for stress in concrete less than about 1/3 of the characteristic strength, the ultimate creep strain is given by this formula. So whenever the stress in concrete, right, whenever the stress in concrete is about 1/3 of its characteristic strength, that is, if the stress in concrete is 1/3 of FCK, 1/3 of FCK value, the ultimate creep strain can be calculated by using this formula. Can be calculated by using this formula. That is when the stress in concrete is less than 1/3 of its characteristic strength. Okay, so remember this formula. How can we calculate the ultimate creep strain? Okay, now coming to a few next point, coming to your next point. So the creep strain depends on several factors, right? Creep strain depends on several factors. It increases with the increase in the following variables. So a creep strain will increase. Creep strain will increase with the increase in the following variables. If these four variables increase, right? If these four variables increase, then the value of creep strain will also increase. Okay, so creep strain will increase with the increase in cement content. Okay, if the cement content increases, your creep strain will increase because the cement to paste aggregate ratio will increase. So if the cement content is more, there will be more creep which will be occurring in your concrete. So that is why we have to keep our cement concrete. That is why we keep our cement content in our concrete low, right? We try to keep the cement content to a minimum so that we avoid this creep strain. Okay. So the next thing is creep strain increases with increase in water to cement ratio. If the water to cement ratio is more, the creep strain that will occur is more because there is more expulsion of water which is there in the voids. So there will be more creep. So what we do is we can try to keep the water to cement ratio low. We try to keep it as minimum as possible. So we need to keep our cement content to a minimum and also our water to cement ratio also minimum. Then air entrainment. If there is more air entrainment, there is more creep strain which will occur, right? So what we have to do, we have to take care that the air entrainment is kept minimum, okay? Or we can completely avoid the air entrainment. Okay, so coming to your fourth point, ambient temperature. So if the ambient temperature is more, there will be more creep strain which will be occurring, and if the ambient temperature is lesser, there will be lesser creep strain occurring. So it is directly proportional to your ambient temperature. So ambient temperature, by ambient temperature, what I mean is the environmental temperature around your concrete. That is the temperature which is surrounding your concrete. Yeah, environmental temperature around your concrete. So if that is more, there is more creep because if the temperature increases, there is more loss of water, right? There is more loss of water from your voids, and that will increase your creep strain. So what we try to do is we try to keep our concrete at the ambient temperature. That is what we try to do is the concrete temperature and the environmental temperature. We try to maintain it the same thing because if there is a large difference in your ambient temperature and your concrete temperature, there will be more expulsion of your water from your concrete. So that will cause creep as well as shrinkage. It will also cause shrinkage. So what we try to do is we try to maintain the concrete temperature as the same, which is the environmental temperature. So coming to next point, so the creep strain decreases with the increasing following variables. So your creep strain will decrease with the increase of the following variables. So if these variables increase in their value, creep strain will decrease in value. So it is indirectly proportional. So creep strain is indirectly proportional to these three variables. So with the increase in age of loading, at the time of loading, the creep strain will decrease. So age of concrete at the time of loading. So what we try to do is we try to load the structure as later as possible. Okay, so the loading of structure we try to do as late as possible. So if the age of concrete at the time of loading is more, right, the creep strain will be lesser. So that is what we try to follow. So we try to load the structure at a later age, okay, as much as possible. So that the creep strain is lesser in my concrete. So coming to the next point, that is relative humidity. So relative humidity is, as the term says, a relative humidity compared to your concrete. So if that is more, if the relative humidity is more, then the creep strain is lesser. Remember. Okay, so if the creep strain, if you want to decrease the creep strain, what we have to do, we have to increase the relative humidity. Humidity, you know what is humidity, then relative humidity, we have to keep it at a maximum so that the creep strain is lesser. Then next point is volume to surface area ratio. Volume to surface area ratio we have to increase, meaning your volume by surface area. So for this ratio to increase, either we have to lesser our surface area or we have to increase our volume. So both can be done. We can increase our volume and decrease our surface area. That is, we can keep our surface area to a minimum. We can decrease our surface area for a constant volume. So by that, what happens is there is lesser surface area available for your moisture to escape, right? When we have lesser surface area, there will be lesser escape of water from your voids and lesser escape of moisture from your concrete, and hence there will be decrease in your creep. So what we try to do is we try to increase our surface volume to surface area ratio. Volume to surface area ratio we try to increase. So coming to your IS 1343/2012, right? So this is your code for pre-stressed concrete. So this code gives guidelines to estimate the ultimate creep strain in section 6.2.5. So if you go through this section 6.2.5, you will have this guidelines to estimate the ultimate creep strain in concrete. Okay, in concrete, ultimate creep strain in concrete. To find the ultimate creep strain in concrete, some guidelines are given in this particular section. So this is regarding creep of concrete. This is regarding creep of your concrete. So after creep of concrete, the next important topic is your shrinkage of concrete, and this is the last topic which we will be studying. So the next important property of concrete is shrinkage of concrete, right? Shrinkage of concrete. Shrinkage is nothing but the contraction or your decrease in volume. Okay, so shrinkage of concrete is defined as the contraction due to loss in moisture. So whenever there is loss in moisture, concrete will contract in size, it will decrease in size or it will decrease in volume. So that is nothing but your shrinkage of concrete. So it is mainly due to loss of moisture. Whenever the concrete loses its moisture or whenever it becomes dry, no, there is reduction in its size. There is contraction of concrete that occurs. So that is nothing but termed as shrinkage of concrete. Okay, that contraction in volume due to loss of moisture is termed as shrinkage of concrete. Okay, so you have understood now what is shrinkage of concrete, what is meant by shrinkage of concrete. Then the study of shrinkage is important in pre-stressed concrete to calculate the losses in pre-stress, right? So what happens when there is shrinkage of concrete? Whenever there is shrinkage of concrete, there is some amount of loss which occurs in pre-stress, right? Your steel which is embedded in your concrete, right? Steel is embedded in your concrete, it is tensioned and it is embedded. So whenever there is a decrease in your volume of your concrete, so there is a simultaneous decrease of size in your pre-stressing steel also, right, which is embedded in your concrete. So along with your concrete shrinking, there is also shrinking of your steel which is embedded in your concrete. So the what that will cause is that will cause losses in pre-stress. Whatever we have tensioned our steel, so there will be reduction in that. So there will be loss in our pre-stress. So the study of shrinkage is important in our pre-stress concrete. So because of this, we have to study shrinkage in pre-stressed concrete. So your shrinkage and creep, right? Your shrinkage and creep are not very important whenever it is related to RCC structures, whenever it is related to RCC structures, because there is no dealing with the pre-stress. No, there is no dealing with pre-stress, and then there is no dealing of losses in pre-stress. So the shrinkage and creep are not of much concern whenever we are dealing with RCC elements. But when we are dealing with our pre-stressed concrete, we have to study and we have to take into account the shrinkage and creep of concrete whenever we are designing. So shrinkage occurs due to two causes. Shrinkage occurs due to these two causes: loss of water from voids, right? The same reason that is for creep, the same reason is for shrinkage also: the loss of water from our voids, and reduction in volume during carbonation. So carbonation is the process when after the hardening of concrete, right? Carbonation is the process or the chemical reaction that occurs after your concrete is hardened, right? Whenever it is aging, so that carbonation reaction occurs with concrete. So what your concrete does is it absorbs some amount of CO2. It absorbs, your hardened concrete absorbs some amount of CO2 from the atmosphere, and it forms a calcium carbonate. It forms calcium carbonate. So that is your carbonation reaction. So what that causes carbonation and reduction in volume, right? Reduction in volume during carbonation. So reduction in volume meaning nothing but shrinkage in concrete. So these are the two major reasons why the shrinkage in concrete occurs: because of the loss of water, because of the loss of moisture from your concrete, that is nothing but a drying of your concrete, and the second reason is because of reduction of volume during carbonation. So the following figure shows the variation of shrinkage strain with time. This figure shows the variation of shrinkage strain with time. So this axis is your shrinkage strain, and this is your time axis, which is a linear scale. Okay, time axis. Here T naught is the time at commencement of drying. So this is T naught. So whenever the drying starts to occur, right, we are curing our concrete. The shrinkage does not occur whenever there is a proper curing of concrete, right? When we are curing it, there is no loss of moisture during curing. So there is no shrinkage which is occurring during curing. So after we cure and we put it we put it in service, right? Whenever we put our concrete in service after curing, there is a particular point of time after which your concrete starts to dry. That particular time is here denoted as T naught. When our concrete starts to dry, that point we mark it as T naught, okay, on the time scale. So the shrinkage strain increases at a decreasing rate with time, same as a creep, right? It starts to increase after T naught. Your shrinkage strain, you can see it is starting to increase, but it is not increasing continuously like this. It is not increasing continuously like this, which I have drawn. Okay, so it has a decreasing rate with time. So it has a decreasing rate. So it will go on decreasing, right? It will go on decreasing, and it will ultimately attain a stable value. It will attain a stable value. So that stable value is your ultimate shrinkage strain. So this a stable value which it obtains later on with time is your ultimate shrinkage strain. Okay, ultimate shrinkage strain. So ultimate shrinkage strain is estimated to calculate the loss in pre-stress. So to calculate the loss in pre-stress, we have to find this ultimate shrinkage strain. So this is obtained from your graph here. It is obtained from your graph here. You can see this stable value which is drawn. This is a line which is drawn here. So this is your ultimate shrinkage strain. So that is required whenever we want to calculate the loss in pre-stress due to shrinkage. Okay, so coming to your next point, same as creep. Okay, same as our creep, shrinkage strain increases with the increase in the following variables. Whenever these four variables increase, there is increase in your shrinkage. So they are almost same compared to your creep. So ambient temperature, right, which is applicable to creep also. So increase in ambient temperature increases your shrinkage strain. Okay. Next thing, temperature gradient in members. Temperature gradient. What I mean by temperature gradient is your loss of moisture. Temperature gradient is the loss of moisture. So suppose this is your temperature, this is your temperature axis, and this is your time axis, this is your time, and this is your temperature. Okay, so if the temperature gradient meaning slope. Okay, so if the temperature gradient is more like this, if it is steep, right, if it is steep, so there is a there is a loss of moisture in lesser amount of time, right? So in this much amount of time there is loss of moisture. So but if the temperature gradient is increased like this, there is increase in there is increase in shrinkage strain. But if your temperature gradient is lower like this, if it is having a slope like this, so you can see it will take considerable amount of time, right? It will take this much amount of time for the loss of moisture. So if the temperature gradient is steep, or if it is more like this, if it is more, there will be more shrinkage strain compared to this slope. Okay, if the slope is lesser, there is shrinkage strain is lesser. So this is what is your temperature gradient. Okay, so coming to your next point, that is water to cement ratio. As I have told you, if there is more moisture, if there is more water, or if there is more moisture in the concrete, so what will happen is after drying, that moisture and that water will start to escape your concrete, and that will cause more shrinkage strain in our concrete. So what we have to do is we have to try to keep our water content and our water to cement ratio to a minimum, to a minimum. So coming to your last point, that is cement content, same as in your creep. So what we have to try to keep is we have to try to keep our cement content to a minimum. Okay, so that our shrinkage strain is also lesser. So if your cement content is increasing, your shrinkage strain increases. If our water to cement ratio increases, the shrinkage strain also increases. And with your ambient temperature increasing, your shrinkage strain will also increase. So these are the four variables which increasing will cause our increase in shrinkage. So next, these three variables you can see, if these variables increase, if these variables increase, our shrinkage strain will decrease. Okay, so the increase in the following variables will cause a shrinkage strain decrease. Okay, so the same three variables you can see which are applicable for creep also. So the age of concrete at commencement of drying. So if the age of concrete is more at the T naught value, there is lesser shrinkage that will occur. So what we have to do is we have to try to keep the age more whenever the commencement of drying occurs. So this T naught value, right, this is the point wherein the commencement of your drying starts. So this T naught value we should try to keep, the age of concrete we should try to keep as much as possible at your T naught. So the age of concrete, if it is more, it will be having more strength, it will be having more stiffness and all those things. So it will cause lesser drying, and which will lead to lesser shrinkage. So the age of concrete should be more at the commencement of drying, and the relative humidity, as I've told you, it should be more so that the shrinkage is lesser. And also the same thing, volume to surface area ratio, so this should be more so that there is lesser shrinkage strain. So for this ratio to be more, our surface area should be lesser, right? Our surface area should be lesser. So what happens when the surface area is lesser? When the surface area is lesser, there is a lesser amount of area which is available for the moisture to escape. So what that will cause is it will cause decrease in your shrinkage. It will cause decrease in your shrinkage. So these are the three variables. With the increase of these three variables, there will be a decrease in our shrinkage strain. So coming to your IS code for pre-stress, that is IS 1343/2012. So this gives guidelines to estimate the shrinkage strain. Okay, so this gives the guidelines to estimate the shrinkage strain in our section 6.2.4. So if you look into this section 6.2.4, it will have these guidelines on how to estimate the shrinkage strain in our PSC members. So this is about your properties of concrete. Okay, so this is about our properties of concrete, wherein we have studied the strength of concrete as the first property. Then we have studied or stiffness of concrete as the second property, stiffness. Then durability is the third main property. Then after durability, we have studied stress strain curves for our concrete. right? After stress strain curve, we have looked into creep of concrete, and then we have studied, after creep, we have studied our shrinkage of concrete. So these are the main properties related to concrete which we have studied. Now, moving on to next. After this, we have to look into the properties of our steel. Okay, properties of steel we have to look into. Similarly, as we have looked into the properties of pre-stressing concrete, we have to look into the properties of pre-stressing steel. Okay, so let me just share the screen. Okay, I hope you can see the screen which I've shared. So we will be discussing in this class the properties of pre-stressing steel. Okay, properties of pre-stressing steel. We have studied the properties of pre-stressing concrete. Now we will study the properties of pre-stressing steel. So IS 1343/2012, okay, IS 1343/2012 specifies the material properties of steel in section 5.6. So in this particular section 5.6, the material properties of steel, whatever the properties of steel are there, the material properties are specified in this particular section. So you can go through this section and read the material properties of steel which are required. Okay. So the steel in pre-stressed application has to be of good quality, right? Not like the regular HYSD, that is the deformed steel, and your mild steel which we use in RCC. So that is not applicable here. We have to have good quality pre-stressing steel, and which is having higher tensile strength, because the tensile force which we apply is in the range of thousands, right? It is in the range of 1500, 2000, 3000, right? So if that is the amount of tensile force which we apply, then our HYSD bars and our mild steel bars will simply fail. So we have to use good quality and high strength pre-stressing steel. So it requires the following attributes, right? It has to have the following attributes. What our pre-stressing steel should have the following attributes. The first main attribute that is required is high strength, as I've told you. So our pre-stressing force is very large. So to handle that pre-stressing force, high pre-stressing force, we need to have high strength pre-stressing steel. Okay, high strength pre-stressing steel, which is having FY value of around right 2000, 1500, 2000, 2500. That is the amount of strength that is having the strength that is our pre-stressing steel is having. That is the amount of strength. Okay, and coming to your next property, that is, it should have adequate ductility. It should have adequate ductility, right? Every steel should have some amount of ductility, so that it gives warning before failure, right? Before it fails, it deforms. Certain amount of deformation is shown, so that warning is given to the people residing in our structure, and we can have adequate time for escaping the failure before the structure fails. So that is why ductility is also required. And we have seen that in post tension members, we have a curved profile, right? Curved profile for our tendons, right? Let me just draw. So if this is our post tension beam, if this is our post tension beam, uh, your pre-stressing steel or tendon can be curved like this. It can be curved like this. So it should have ductility, so that it can be bent and it can be passed through the ducts like this. Also, it can be of variable profile, right? It can be like this, and it may be going straight, and then it may going up, and like this it may have a varying profile. So whenever there is bending that is occurring, ductility is required and bendability property is required. So our steel should be able to bend, and it should be ductile. So that is a prerequisite of our pre-stressing steel. So coming to next property, we can see it should have high bond. It should have high bond, and that is mainly required in our pre-tension members, right? Higher bond is required in our pre-tension members, because in basically in pre-tension members, the tendon or the pre-stressing steel is held in place solely by bond, solely by bond over the transmission length, right? It is not held in place at the end because of the end anchorages. It is directly held into place because of the bond between concrete and the steel. Because of this, we need a higher bond strength of our pre-stressing steel, right? We need to have higher bond of our pre-stressing steel. This property is important in especially in pre-tensioned members. Next, so the next property is low relaxation to reduce losses, right? So we know that there is some amount of losses which occur in our pre-stressing concrete, right? There is some amount of losses which occur, and there is loss of pre-stress in steel due to relaxation. In relaxation, because of the relaxation of steel, there is some amount of loss which occurs in our pre-stress, right? So what I mean by relaxation is whenever with time passing, right? As the time passes, the steel starts to relax, right? The pre-stressed steel which we have applied to our concrete, the pre-stressed steel which is tensioned. So as the time passes, the steel starts to relax, and it starts to lose some amount of pre-stress because of this relaxation of steel. So the one of the main property of the pre-stressing steel is the relaxation should be low. Relaxation of this steel should be low, so that relaxation losses are lesser, or they are eliminated. So that is one important attribute of pre-stressing steel is that it should have low relaxation, so that the losses due to relaxation are reduced. Okay, so moving on to the last property, last attribute that our pre-stressing steel should have, that is, it should have minimum corrosion. One most important property, that it should have minimum corrosion. As I've told you that in PSC, or that is in pre-stressed concrete, the amount of steel that is required, right? The amount of steel that is required is lesser. It is lesser compared to that of RCC elements. It is lesser. The amount of steel which is required is lesser compared to RCC. So we should try to avoid corrosion to the maximum extent, because we have first of all we have lesser amount of steel, and if that less amount of steel starts to corrode, there is sure possibility of the structure failing. So what we have to do, we have to avoid this corrosion at any cost. We have to keep this corrosion to a minimum. So that is one main attribute of a pre-stressing steel, that it should be resistant to corrosion. It should be resistant to corrosion, and it should undergo minimum amount of corrosion whenever it is exposed to moisture and other chemicals. So these are the five main properties which we have discussed, or the attributes of pre-stressing steel which it should have, so that our pre-stressing is very economical, and it is effective, So coming to your properties of pre-stressing steel, the first and foremost property of our pre-stressing steel which we will study is strength of pre-stressing steel. Strength. Okay, so we have studied the strength of pre-stressing concrete, right? We have studied the strength of concrete, which is denoted by FCK, right? It is denoted by FCK, which is the characteristic compressive strength of our concrete at 28 days strength. Okay, so that is the characteristic compressive strength of concrete, which is denoted by FCK. Similarly, the characteristic tensile strength of our steel, similarly, the characteristic tensile strength of concrete, it is denoted by FPK. Okay, the tensile strength of pre-stressing steel is given in terms of characteristics tensile strength FPK. Remember, for concrete it is FCK, for steel it is FPK. So F denotes strength, right? F denotes strength. If it is C, meaning it is concrete, and K is what is meant by characteristic strength. Okay, so this is for characteristic strength, this is for concrete, and this is your strength, this is your stress, that is Newton per mm square, we denote as F. So this is for concrete because it is C. And whenever we are dealing with PSC, right, whenever we are dealing with PSC, we have this pre-stressing tendons, right? Pre-stressing tendon, that is denoted by P. Okay, and K is nothing but your characteristic strength. So this is how you denote your characteristic tensile strength for pre-stressing steel, that is FPK. Okay, so P denotes for pre-stressing steel, and C is denoted for concrete. Okay, so remember this. So ultimate tensile strength of a Köppen specimen, that is a sample specimen, ultimate tensile strength of a sample specimen is determined by the testing machine according to IS 1521 1972. Okay, so if you look into this code, you will have the you will have the guidelines on how to conduct and how to determine the ultimate tensile strength of a coupon specimen. Okay, so tensile strength is usually done by the tensile machine, wherein you put a specimen in the tensile machine and you pull or you apply tensile forces to your element. So you have done this in your lab, wherein you took a mild steel specimen, right, and you applied tensile forces and you draw the stress strain curve and you determine the strength of your steel. So similarly, you can determine the ultimate tensile strength of a specimen by the same method. So the guidelines are given in this code, that is IS 1521 1972. Okay, you can go through this code. So this is about the strength of our pre-stressing steel. So this is about the strength of our pre-stressing steel, which is the first property. Now coming to the second property of our steel. Second property of steel, you can see it is stiffness. It is stiffness of pre-stressing steel. Stiffness of pre-stressing steel. Okay, so the stiffness of pre-stressing steel is given by initial modulus of elasticity. I have told you that we have three ways of determining the modulus of elasticity. That is by the initial modulus, then there is a tangent modulus, and then there is secant modulus. So for concrete, we use secant modulus, but for here in steel, we use the initial modulus of elasticity. Okay, initial modulus of elasticity we use. So the modulus of elasticity depends on the form of pre-stressing steel. Okay, so it depends. So the modulus of elasticity depends on the type of pre-stressing steel, whether it is a wire or whether it is a strand or whether it is a tendon or whether it is a bar. So depending on that, the elasticity, modulus of elasticity varies. Okay, so stiffness is nothing but your ability to resist your deformation, right? It is the ability to resist deformation. So stiffness we cannot measure directly. So what we do is, for stiffness we relate our stiffness to modulus of elasticity, right? We relate our stiffness to modulus of elasticity because higher the modulus of elasticity, higher is the stiffness of your element, okay, or your member. So if the higher is the modulus of elasticity, higher is the stiffness, meaning it is directly proportional. So that is why we relate our stiffness to modulus of elasticity. Next, coming to your next point. So it in IS 1343, that is the pre-stressing code for your pre-stressed concrete. So IS 1343 to 1980, it provides the following guidelines which can be used in absence of test data. So whenever there is no test data available with you, whenever you do not have any test data with you, you can follow this guidelines which is provided in this IS 1343. So table number 1.7.4 gives us this modulus of elasticity. Okay, it gives us this the modulus of elasticity for type of steel. For different type of steel. Okay, if you have cold drawn wires, the modulus of elasticity you can use is 210 kilonewton per mm squared. Okay, if you have cold drawn wires, and if you have high tensile steel bars, okay, if there are high tensile steel bars, okay, so you can use the modulus of elasticity as 200 kilonewton per mm squared. And if you are having strands, okay, if you are having strands as the type of steel, then you can use the modulus of elasticity as 195 kilonewton per mm squared. You can see that wires and bars are having more modulus of elasticity or more strength or more stiffness compared to your strands. Okay, so why is this? Why is your strand having lesser modulus of elasticity compared to wire and bars? Because strand is made up of multiple wires, right? Strand is made up of multiple wires, usually odd in number. It can be 3, 5, 7, and going up to 9, 12, going up to your any number depending upon your design. So strand is made up of several wires. Whenever we test our individual wire, it will be having more modulus of elasticity compared to your strand, which is having a combination of wires. So why your strand has lesser stiffness is because whenever we apply our tensile force, right? Whenever we apply tensile force to our strand, that tensile force is not equally divided, in all our wires. It is not equally. Some amount of wires are more stressed and some amount of wires are less stressed. So equally it is not distributed. Yeah, what our stress or our force which you apply is not equally distributed in all our wires. So that is why our strands will always have lesser modulus of elasticity compared to individual wires. So that is what you can is reflected in this table, which you can see that our cold drawn wires are having more modulus of elasticity compared to strands. Okay, so this is regarding pre-stress. This is regarding stiffness of our pre-stressing steel, which is the second property which we have studied. Okay, this is the second property which we have studied. So coming to next topic, that is allowable stress in pre-stressing steel. Allowable stress. So there is some amount of limitation which we apply, some amount of limitation to our stress which can be applied to steel, right? Just like in our concrete, wherein we limit our FCK, right? We limit to 67%, and then we divide that by our partial safety factor, right? We do not directly stress it up to FCK value. What we do in design, we take 67% of our FCK, that is 0.67 FCK, and then we divide it by our partial safety factor. So in the similar way, what we do is we limit our allowable stress in pre-stressing steel. We do not stress our pre-stressing steel up to FPK value. What we do is we as per the clause, you can see as per the clause 19.5.1, 19.5.1, that is our clause in our IS 1343, IS 1343 clause number 19.5.1, the maximum tensile stress during pre-stressing. Okay, the maximum tensile stress during pre-stressing FPI, okay, that is denoted by FPI, that is the tensile stress during pre-stressing is denoted by FPI, shall not exceed 76% of the ultimate tensile strength. So this stress which we apply during pre-stressing should not exceed 76% of our ultimate tensile strength, that is FPU. If FPU is the ultimate tensile strength, so we should apply only 76% of the ultimate tensile strength when we are pre-stressing our wires, whenever we are pre-stressing wires, bars or strands, whichever is the element, we have to limit our pre-stressing to 76% of ultimate tensile strength. Okay, so remember this. So it is given in your clause 19.5.1. You can go and read. So this same statement is given over there. So this is allowable stress in pre-stressing steel. So let me just ask if anyone has any kind of doubts, or if you want to ask anything, whatever I've explained up till now, you are free to ask. It is 11:27 a.m. Okay, if you have anything to ask, or if you have any doubts, you can ask. You are free to ask. You can type in chat, or you can just unmute and you can ask. Okay, so what I'll do is I will continue with the next property of steel. I will continue with the next property of steel. If you have any doubts, you can continue typing in the chat, and that is not an issue. Okay, so next important property that we have to study is the stress strain curve. Similarly, as we have studied the stress strain curve for our concrete, similarly we have to study the stress strain curve for the pre-stressing steel. Okay, so the stress versus strain behavior of pre-stressing steel under uniaxial tension is initially linear. Okay, so the stress strain behavior of our steel is initially it is linear. That is, stress is proportional to strain, linear and elastic. Okay, what do you mean by elastic? Is strain is recovered at unloading. Whenever we unload our structure, the strain is fully recovered. That is, there is no deformation. Whenever we load our structure, there is certain amount of deflection which occurs, right? And after we unload, that entire deflection will be regained back and the structure will be normal, right? There will be no permanent deformation after unloading, right? So that is what is meant by elastic. So initially the stress strain curve is linear and elastic, right? You can see this is the stress strain curve. You can see this is the stress axis, this is the strain axis. So initially you can see it is straight, it is linear and it is elastic. So this part is linear and it is elastic. So that is what is told in this statement. It is linear and elastic initially. Okay, under uniaxial tension. Remember, whenever it is under uniaxial tension, the stress versus strain behavior is initially linear and it is elastic. So beyond 70% of the ultimate strength. So whenever we go on increasing the load, so above or beyond your 70% of ultimate strength, what happens? The behavior becomes non-linear and inelastic. So you can see beyond 70%, the behavior starts to become non-linear. It becomes curved and it is inelastic, meaning the strain is not recovered after unloading. It is inelastic and it is non-linear. You can see it is becoming non-linear after 70% of the ultimate strength is crossed. Okay, and you can see there is no definite yield point. There is no definite yield point in this curve. There is no definite yield point in this curve. So what we do is to determine the yield point, because there is no definite yield point here. To determine this yield point, what we do is we use proof stress concept. We use proof stress concept or a specified yield strength. So what our IS 1343/2012 recommends is, what our code recommends is, we use a yield point at a 0.2% proof stress. Okay, 0.2% proof stress. So how do we determine it? You can see in this curve, 0.2%. 0.2% meaning 0.2 divided by 100. So it will be 0.002. So at this particular amount of strain value, what you do is you draw a line parallel to this initial straight line. At this particular value of strain, you draw a straight line, and this straight line cuts the curve at this point. You can see it cuts the curve at this point, and the corresponding stress value, this corresponding stress value is nothing but your proof stress. That is your proof stress, or what is your yield stress. Okay, proof stress is nothing but your yield stress. So at a 0.2% value of your strain, we draw a line which is parallel to your initial straight line of your curve, and the corresponding stress value is your proof stress value. Okay, so this is shown in your figure. I have shown you how you determine your proof stress, because there is no definite yield point, and this proof stress is nothing but your yield stress, which we consider. So coming to your next point, that is the characteristic stress strain curves are given in figure number 5 of your code IS 1343. If you look into the figure number 5 of IS 1343/2012, you will find these curves. Okay, you will find these curves. So the stress corresponding to strain can be found out by the curves using because which is shown next. Okay, so you can use these curves and you can find out your stress at a particular amount of strain. Okay, corresponding strain can be found out by using these curves. The stress corresponding to a particular amount of strain can be found out. So let me just explain this stress strain curves for pre-stressing steel. So this first curve you can see it is for stress relieved wires, bars and strands. Okay, so this curve is for stress relieved ones, stress relieved wires, wherein the stress in your steel wires and steel wires, bars, or whatever it is, the stress is relieved. It is some type of uh, uh, treatment which you give to your wire, bars and strands, so that the stress in this is relieved. Okay, so such kind of wires, whenever you plot your stress strain curve for these wires, you can see it is linear and elastic in the initial stage, and then it becomes non-linear and inelastic. Okay, so the strain corresponding to strain, we have 0.002, that is your same value which is here. Okay, so what we do, we draw a straight line which is parallel to this initial straight line, and whenever it cuts your curve, okay, whenever it cut your curve, that corresponding stress, you can see it is 0.9 fpk. It is 90% of your fpk value, your characteristic tensile strength value. You can see at 0.2% of your strain value, the stress value which you get is 90% of your fpk value. Okay, and the maximum strain value which you consider usually is 0.005. Okay, so corresponding to this value, the corresponding stress value, you can see it is going to 95% of your FPK value. It is going 95% of your FPK value. And similarly, coming to as drawn wires, this graph is for as drawn wires, or what you mean by as drawn wires, it is untreated wires, right? Nothing treatment is given to your wires. It is directly as it is drawn. Okay, so these wires are non-treated wires, no stress relieving or no indentation or no cold drawing or no hot rolling. Nothing of that treatment is given to these wires. It is as drawn wires. Okay, so to this strain value, that is 0.2% strain value, you what you do is you draw a straight line which is parallel to your initial straight curve, and the corresponding stress value, you can see it is 85% of your FPK value. And if you compare it to your stress relieved wires, we can see it is lesser. In a stress relieved wire, it was 90% of your FPK value, but here it is 85% of your FPK value. But if you look into your strain value of 0.005, you can see the corresponding stress value is same as that in stress relieved wires, that is 95% of FPK. Right. So this graph you can use to calculate or to find out the corresponding stress values for your corresponding strain values. So this graph or these curves you can find in your figure number 5 of your IS 1343/2012. So this is regarding your stress strain curves. So coming to your next, as I've told you in your stress strain curve for your concrete, wherein you do not use directly the FCK value, but you use 67% of your value, right? So similarly, what you do in your steel, what you do in steel is you do not directly use the characteristic value. What we do is we limit we limit our characteristic value to a certain amount, and then that is called your design stress, right? So the design stress strain curves are calculated by dividing the stress beyond 80% of your FPK value, right? Dividing the stress beyond zero point 0.8 FPK by a material safety factor of 1.15. So this is your material safety factor, that is gamma m, that is 1.15. In your concrete, we used our material safety factor as 1.5, but here in steel we use it as 1.15. Okay, just 15% we are using, and there we had used in concrete we had used 50%, and here we are using only 15%, that is 1.15. Okay, so what we do is beyond this 0.8 FPK value, right? Beyond this 0.8 FPK value, what we do is we divide this entire curve by 1.15. We divide it by 1.15, and the corresponding curve that we get is called the design curve. Okay, so we divide our characteristic curve beyond 0.8 FPK by 1.15, right? By 1.15, and that curve is called as design curve, and this is what we use for our designing purpose. Okay, this design curve is what we use for design purpose. Similarly, we have done the same process in our concrete also, right? Wherein we used 67% of our characteristic strength, right? 67% we used, and later what we did is we divided that 67% by our material safety factor, that is 1.5. So similarly, the same process is done over here. So after this stress strain property, which property or curve which we have studied, the next important thing which we have to study is our relaxation in steel, right? Relaxation of our steel. So this is related to steel. This property is not seen in our concrete. So this is a property unique to steel. Okay. So relaxation of steel is defined as the decrease in stress with time under constant strain. So what this says is there is a constant amount of strain, right? Constant amount of strain, but there is decreasing in stress with time. So as time passes, at a constant strain, there is decrease in stress. There is decrease in stress value. So that is what is relaxation of steel, right? Decrease in the stress value as the time passes under constant strain. So not under constant load, okay, but under constant strain. So under constant strain, as the time passes, there is decrease in stress value. So that is what is our relaxation of steel. So due to relaxation of steel, the pre-stress in tendon is reduced with time, right? Because there is a decrease in stress, that is what causes our loss in pre-stress, right? The loss of pre-stress, and hence the study of relaxation is important in pre-stress concrete. Okay, hence the study of relaxation is important because there is loss of pre-stress which is occurring due to relaxation of steel. So because of this, we have to study relaxation of steel. Okay. The relaxation depends on the type of steel, right? The amount of relaxation which occurs in steel, it mainly depends on the type of steel which we are using. Then the amount of pre-stress which we have applied, right? Amount of pre-stress which we have applied, the type of steel and the temperature. Okay, so important is temperature because steel is susceptible to temperature. As the temperature increases, the size of our steel will also increase, or what will happen is our steel will undergo expansion with increase in temperature. So the type of steel, the amount of initial pre-stress which you apply, and the temperature. So these are important factors on which our relaxation depends, or the amount of relaxation depends. Okay. So yeah, these three you have to remember. Then next, the following figure shows the effect of relaxation due to different types of loading conditions. Okay. Similarly, which we have studied in concrete, here we have a stress versus strain curve. Okay, stress versus strain curve, and you can see this is the curve which is for fast loading, okay, which is for fast loading. And whenever we have sustained loading, that is we have constant loading, we have constant loading. And what happens is there is relaxation, effect of relaxation. You can see this is the effect of relaxation. You can see that the curve is not same whenever we have sustained loading. We have the curve has decreased. You can see there is decrease in stress. You can see there is decrease in stress at a same amount of strain. Okay, the strain is same, the amount of strain is same, but there is decrease in stress, right? So that is what we have defined our relaxation as. The strain is constant, but there is decrease in stress. Okay. For example, here, this is the strain amount. We have same strain amount, but you can see there is decrease in stress. We can see there is decrease in stress. There is decrease in stress. So this is due to effect of relaxation. This decrease in stress at a constant strain is due to the effect of relaxation. Okay, so this is explained in our curve over here, stress strain curve. Okay, so this is about your relaxation of steel. So in absence of test data, whenever we do not have any test data, so our code IS1343 recommends the following estimate of relaxation losses. So our code, what it gives us, it gives us an estimate. It gives us an estimate of the relaxation losses. So table number 6. So this is a screenshot from your IS1343. So table number 6 gives us the relaxation losses for pre-stressing steel at 1000 hours. Okay, at 1000 hours at 20 plus or minus 2 degrees Celsius. So this is applicable whenever our pre-stressing steel is at this temperature at 20 plus or minus 2 degrees Celsius. So this table can be applied. Okay, so the relaxation losses can be directly found out. It can be directly found out. So you can see the first column is serial number, and the second column is initial stress. Okay, the amount of initial stress which we have applied. So if we have applied 50% of our initial pre-stress, okay, 0.5 P, wherein FP is your nothing but your FPK. Okay, it is FPK. So if we have applied 0.5 FPK as the initial stress, okay, as the initial stress, if we have applied 0.5 FPK, then relaxation losses, okay, relaxation losses will be 0, 0. Okay, there will be no normal relaxation and low relaxation. There will be 0, 0 amount of relaxation losses. Okay, so relaxation losses is given in percentage. It is given in percentage. Okay, in the next you can see we have increased our initial pre-stress. We have increased our initial pre-stress, that is from 0.fpk to 0.6 fpk. So whenever we have 0.6 fpk as the initial stress, you can see the normal relaxation loss is 3% and the low relaxation loss is 1%. And if we go on increasing the initial pre-stress, okay, you can see if we go on increasing the initial pre-stress, the normal relaxation and the low relaxation percentage also go on increasing. That is, if we apply 0.8% of fpk, you can see that the normal relaxation is 8% and the low relaxation loss is 4.5%. Okay, as the initial pre-stress that we apply goes on increasing, the relaxation losses also go on increasing. So what I mean by this normal relaxation and low relaxation, I will explain it in detail whenever we are dealing it with our losses chapter. Okay, when we are in our second module, that is dealing with our losses in pre-stress, I will explain this normal and low relaxation, okay, in detail. So coming to your next property, okay, coming to your next property, that is fatigue. So this is also property unique to steel. Okay, this is not applicable to concrete. So this fatigue property is unique to steel and which we need to study in our pre-stress. Okay, so fatigue property we do not usually study in RCC members because there is no reversal of stresses, right, which occur in our RCC members. But that is the case. Reversal of stresses are occurring in our pre-stress members, right, in our pre-stress steel. So what we have to do, we have to study this fatigue in our pre-stressing steel. So this property is important in our pre-stressing concrete members. Okay, so under repeated dynamic load, so dynamic load you have studied under SOM, right, that is your rolling loads, that is an example of your dynamic load, wherein the magnitude and direction goes on changing with respect to time, right. When whatever you have studied in your structural analysis, right, is your static loads, wherein the magnitude and their direction do not change as the time passes, right. So they are static loads. But whenever we have dynamic loads, right, like your rolling loads, right, rolling loads, and what happens is, whenever there are repeated dynamic loads, the strength of the member goes on reducing, right. The strength of the member goes on reducing with the number of cycles, okay, of the applied load. As the number of cycles of your applying and releasing occurs, right. Whenever we apply our load and we release our load, whenever we apply our load and we release our load, so cyclic loading and unloading is there, right. Cyclic unloading and unloading is there. So whenever there is increasing in this number of cycles of applying load and unloading our loads, whenever this number of cycles increasing, as the number of cycles increases, the strength of our member goes on decreasing. Okay, so the reduction in strength is referred to as fatigue. So this reduction in strength, what occurs due to this cyclic application and removal of loads, due to these dynamic loads, is what is termed as your fatigue. Okay, so whenever there is a application and removal of load, so this is one cycle. So whenever there is increase in the number of cycles of your application of load and your unloading of loads, so what happens is the strength of your member goes on decreasing, and that reduction in strength is referred to as fatigue. Okay, so I hope you have understood what I meant by fatigue. So it is mainly occurring due to dynamic loads. As I've told you, it is not occurring in case of static loads. Fatigue is only occurring due to dynamic loads. So an example I can tell you is a bridge. So bridge is mainly dealing with this fatigue losses, okay, wherein it has these rolling loads, wherein you have vehicles passing over it, right. So that is not a static load, that is a dynamic load, wherein it is a rolling load. So our bridges are exposed to this fatigue losses, and whenever there are vibrations are related, right, whenever we have a vibrating machine which is kept on our concrete, on our steel, right. So whenever vibrations are there, and whenever there are vehicles which are moving, so we have to deal with fatigue under this conditions, right? So bridge is a very good example of wherein we have to study our fatigue losses. Okay, so coming to the next point, coming to our next point, in pre-stressed application, the fatigue is negligible in members that do not crack under service loads, right? uh, this is your type 1 members wherein we do not allow any tensile stress to be developed, right? Whenever we do not allow any tensile stress, there will be only compressive stress in your members. There is only compressive stress and there is no tensile stress in our members. So whenever there is no change from compressive stress to tensile stress, right? Whenever there is no change of your stresses or no stress reversals, right? Stress reversals meaning from compressive stress it is going to tensile stress, and again from tensile stress it is coming to compressive stress. So whenever there is stress reversals, there is fatigue occurring. But in our type 1 members, we do not allow any tensile stresses. The member is continuously under compressive force. The member is continuously under compressive force due to our pre-stress, even under service. Okay, even under service. Whenever there are trucks or there are vehicles passing on our bridges, even though when they pass, there is no stress reversal occurring. So the fatigue is not a concern whenever we are dealing with type 1 type of structures, type 1 structures wherein we do not allow any type of tensile forces to be developed in our cross section. So that is one thing. Okay, so whenever next point is if a member cracks. Okay, whenever a member cracks, and cracks occur only when there are tensile forces, right? Cracking occurs only when there are tensile forces or tensile stresses which is developed in your concrete. So whenever cracking occurs or if the member cracks, fatigue may be a concern due to high stress in steel. Okay, so what happens if a member cracks? Whenever the member cracks, the stress which is in your concrete is transferred to your steel. Okay, where whenever a member cracks, the stress which is in your concrete is transferred to your steel. So fatigue is a concern whenever there is cracks occurring. Okay, and especially at the location of cracks, wherever the location of cracks is, there is high amount of stress in your steel. So we have to deal with fatigue wherever there is occurring of cracks. So remember this point. Next point, specimens are tested under 2 into 10 power 6 cycles of load. Okay, to observe fatigue. You can see 2 into 10 power 6 is equal to 2 million. 2 million cycle of loading and unloading is done. Okay, so the specimen is tested for 2 million cycles of loading and unloading to observe fatigue. Okay, and what we do is we plot a curve. Okay, we plot a curve called SN curve, SN diagram, right? So it is stress versus number of cycles. So S denotes stress and N denotes number of cycles for failure. Number of cycles for failure. It is not just number of cycles, it is number of cycles for failure. So that is what is your SN diagram. Okay, stress versus cycles for failure diagram. So for steel, fatigue tests are conducted to develop this stress versus number of cycles for failure diagram. So let me just show you this curve. So this is your stress value, stress axis, and this is your number of cycles required for failure. Okay, number of cycles required for failure, and this is the curve which is forming for your steel. Okay, so let me just show you an example. So you have high amount of stress. Example, you have high amount of stress in your member. You have high amount of stress. You can see that the amount of cycles which is required for it to fail is very less. Okay, so this is the amount of cycles which is required for it to fail. Okay, so if you have lesser amount of stress, okay, compared to your previous example, suppose you have lesser amount of stress, so the amount of cycles or the number of cycles are, required for it to fail is more. Okay, so you can see it is increased. Whenever you have lesser stress, now we have lesser stress in our member, you can see that the corresponding number of cycles required for it to fail is more. Okay, and you can see for even lesser amount of stress, you can see that the number of cycles required for failure goes on increasing. So after a certain number of points, you can see that this curve is a stable curve after certain number of after certain amount of stress. You can see that this amount of stress is your curve has straightened out, right? Let me just erase. Okay, so at this stress level, right, at this stress level, you can see that the curve has straightened out. At this stress level, the curve has become straight. Okay, so beyond this stress level, what happens is the member will never fail. Okay, because it will never cut your curve, it will just go straight, right? Beyond this stress value, if you put your member beyond this stress value, it will never fail. Okay, because it will never cut your curve, because it will never cut your curve. So this limit of stress, what we call it as endurance limit. What we call it as endurance limit. So endurance limit, the limiting value of stress the specimen can withstand a number of infinite number of cycles, right? It will have infinite number of cycles, it will never fail. So this is called your endurance limit. Okay, so under a limiting value of stress, the specimen can withstand infinite number of cycles. This limit is known as endurance limit, or the corresponding stress value is called your endurance limit. So what we can do is the pre-stress member is designed is such that the stress in the steel due to service load remains under endurance limit. Okay, so whenever we are designing our pre-stress members, whenever we are designing our pre-stress members for this fatigue, right? For fatigue, when we are designing our pre-stress members, we have to make sure that the stress in steel during service, right? During service is below this endurance limit, right? It is below this endurance limit. It can have this stress value below this endurance limit, so that it will never fail, because it will never fail and it will never cross this curve, and it can have infinite number of cycles. It can have infinite number of cycles, so that it will never fail. So what we have to do is we have to take care that the stress in our steel at service is below this endurance limit. So that is what you have to take care while designing your pre-stressed element for fatigue. For fatigue, whenever we are designing, you have to take into account this endurance limit, and you have to limit our stress in steel beyond, here to this endurance limit, and it should not cross this endurance limit. Okay, so I hope this fatigue part is clear and your endurance limit is clear. So moving on to next and the last point in your last property, which we will be studying in our steel, is durability, right? As durability of concrete is very important, similarly durability of steel is also very important, right? Because pre-stressing steel is very susceptible to stress corrosion, right? Because our steel, because our pre-stressing steel is under high tension, because it is under high tensile stresses, it is more susceptible to corrosion whenever element is stressed, right? Whenever a steel element is stressed, it is more susceptible to corrosion. And hydrogen embrittlement in aggressive environment, right? So pre-stressing steel is also susceptible to this hydrogen embrittlement. So what happens is, because of its exposure to hydrogen, your steel becomes brittle. It starts to become brittle. And our important property of our steel, that it should be ductile and it should not be brittle. So because of this exposure to hydrogen, what happens is your steel starts to become brittle in nature. So whenever steel becomes brittle in nature, and your load exceeds your limit, your member will have a sudden failure, right? It will have a brittle failure, and it will not deflect before failing, right? It will not have deformation, and it will not give any kind of warning. So this embrittlement of steel is very dangerous. So this pre-stressing steel is susceptible to stress corrosion and embrittlement. So what we have to do, we have to protect our steel, right? Your pre-stressing steel needs to be adequately protected. So what we can do, we have in along with providing cover, right? Along with providing cover for your steel, what we can do is we can provide grout, right? We provide grout for our post tension members, right? For bonded tendons, so that it is protected from our environment. Along with the cover, we have to provide a grout for our bonded tendon. And for unbonded tendon, what we can do is, for unbonded tendon, along with the provision of cover, what we can do is we can epoxy coat our steel. We can epoxy coat our steel. But what this epoxy coating does is it causes less amount of deflection. It reduces your ductility, right? Epoxy coating reduces your ductility. It reduces your bond. Okay, epoxy coating reduces your bond and your ductility. So epoxy coating can be done by taking some proper precautions. Next thing that we can do for unbonded tendons is we can use mastic wraps. Okay, so these mastic wraps is nothing but wrapping up your concrete in your tape, using your tape. Okay, so this is grease impregnated tape. So grease is impregnated along with this mastic wraps. So you can use these mastic wraps to protect your unbonded tendons from your corrosion. Next, what you can do is you can use galvanized bars. Okay, you can use galvanized bars. So these galvanized bars are very resistant to corrosion. Okay, so these galvanized bars are very resistant to corrosion. Remember. Okay, so but one main disadvantage of this galvanized bars is it is very costly compared to your normal pre-stressing steel. Okay, so this galvanized bars is very costly compared to your normal steel bars. So that is one disadvantage, but you can use galvanized steel bars whenever you have a very important structure. Okay, and whenever that important structure is having an aggressive environment around it, so you can use galvanized bar. So coming to our fourth method that you can use for protecting your unbonded tendons, that is encasing the tubes. We can encase our tubes in some kind of protection, right? We can encase our tube in some kind of protection, and then that can avoid your corrosion, right? It can protect your steel from corroding. So that these are a few methods wherein you can use these methods to protect your steel from corrosion and from your aggressive environment. And these are for your unbonded tendons. For bonded tendons, what we can do, we can provide grout, right? We can provide grout and we can provide some amount of cover. So along with cover, these are a few methods which I have explained, which will be helpful for increasing the durability of your steel. Okay, so this is about your properties of your steel. Okay, so if you have anything to ask, if you have any doubts, you can ask now. If you have any doubts regarding any of the properties which I have explained until now, you can ask now. Okay, so what we can do is, if you want, I will continue with the next topic. Okay, so what I can do is I can continue with the next topic if you want. That is your analysis of your pre-stressed members, analysis of your pre-stressed members. So which is an important topic. So if you want, I can continue, or should we continue it in the next class? Just let me know. Just let me know in chat whether should I continue with the next topic, that is analysis of PSC members, or should we continue it in the next class? So 13 of you are here. Just let me know whether we can continue it today itself, because it is not much. It is just 2 pages, 2 to 3 pages. It is just two to three pages. If you want, we can cover it today, or if you want, we can continue it in the next class. So I need at least 5 votes, because 13 of you are here. At least 5 to 6 votes I need. If only 3 of you have told up till now, if I do not get 5 to 6, I will just continue, because the others will be wanting. Okay, so we have 5 votes. So what you can do is you can just type in your attendance, but do not leave the session until I tell you so. Type in your attendance, but do not leave the session until I tell you. Okay, so I hope everyone has typed in their attendance.